very much for having me. You can hear me okay?
Yes, volume can be slightly higher probably, but I asked here, but we hear you very well.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really sorry I can't be there. And who knew that it would be such a pivotal moment in the history between the United States and Europe. I'm going to talk about what kind of AI world we should want versus where we are. I think my remarks are very, very consistent with the last set of remarks. So I would love to see an AI world where AI was grounded in human rights, where fairness, transparency, and where we had trustworthy AI, where the primary focus was on science and technology. The main goal was for the benefit of the humanity, as OpenAI says on their nonprofit application, and where AI didn't screw artists and writers and other creators, and where it wasn't being used as an engine of mass employment, as seems to be the current goal. I'm not really getting what I would like to see. I wrote a book also last year. I hope you'll read both mine and Mariacha's books. The central claim of my book was that generative AI is morally and technically inadequate, and I tried to say what we might do about that. My book was called Taming Silicon Valley, and I dedicated it to Mark Zuckerberg, as you can see. And said, if we don't change course, we will lose society as we know it. And I had his famous quote, move fast and break things, and I warned that that's exactly what was happening. I argued that there were 4 problems. In case you don't get to read the book, at least you could know the central premise. The first was that the particular form of AI technology that everybody is focusing on right now, generative AI, is deeply flawed. I won't read all of this right now. The second was that the companies that are building AI right now talk a good game about responsible AI, but their words don't match their actions. The third is that generative AI is wildly overhyped relative to the realities that it can or has delivered, and that the vague promises of future benefits, perhaps never to be delivered, shouldn't distract citizens and policymakers from the reality of current harms from AI. And finally, I said, and I have the same need for therapy as Mariacha, I said, we are headed towards a kind of AI oligarchy with way too much power, a frightening echo of what had happened with social media. And of course, that's gotten worse. A year later, since I wrote the book, and several months since it was published, I would argue that not much has changed, that all of those concerns remain quite valid. We have newer, larger systems like GPT-4.5 and Grok, but they've no way solved the technical problems that I warned about around unreliability, hallucinations, bias, poor planning, erratic reasoning, and so forth. Companies still discuss responsible AI, but they continue to race products outside the door despite known risks, and those risks are gradually elevating. It hasn't changed their behavior at all. Generative AI continues to be hyped far beyond what it can actually deliver, and policies continue to be shaped around the notion that these hype-issuing companies will deliver what they promise. So policymakers continue to be bamboozled by vague promises of future benefits. And tech oligarchy has, of course, completely taken over the US White House, almost literally with a chainsaw. GPT-5 has actually been a failure. I was very surprised to read this morning that Ezra Klein thinks that AGI is imminent. He's a New York Times columnist. The reality is that, for example, GPT-5 was a failure. Wall Street Journal said that they've been working on it for an enormous amount of time, spent an enormous amount of money. What we actually got was they relabeled it GPT-4.5 because they knew it wasn't going to meet expectations. At least this appears to be what happened. And GPT-4.5 itself has been not that great. It's gotten mixed reviews. It costs 30 times as much money, and it's not that much better. So I had warned for quite some time that the notion of scaling would reach a kind of wall eventually. It seems like it actually has. We can talk about that in the discussion period. But I think we need to realize that the failure of GPT-5 should actually be a prominent data point in the scientific analysis of what's going on. It's not the only one. Grok 3 is 15 times bigger than Grok 2. It required 2 new data centers, and it still has all kinds of problems. And I have this article in my Substack called Grok 3 Beta in Shambles. It doesn't know how to circle letters in a word. I try to do variations on common themes we've seen before. I asked it to draw a picture of a person riding a bicycle. It was a complete failure. And then I used its technique called deep search, which is like OpenAI's deep research. I said, give me a list of all the cities west of Denver. It left out Billings, Montana. I asked what happened to Billings, Montana, and instead of understanding that I meant why is it gone, it told me there was a significant earthquake there, and that significant earthquake never happened. So these problems of hallucinations that we've seen for a long time have not gone away. What has changed is mostly changed for the worst. So the Trump administration revoked the Biden executive order. There's no longer any serious talk of AI regulation in the United States at all. The US is, of course, pressuring the EU to weaken the AI Act and other related laws. I think the Paris AI Summit was largely a disaster. There are no agreements that came out of it. The US successfully forced discussion of many risks off the table altogether. Tech oligarchs obviously have much more power than before. It's not just Musk, it's also his buddies. And the prospects of US-EU collaboration have diminished on many fronts. My message to Europe is this, and it comes in two parts. The first is bluntly, you are our last hope. You're the last hope for defending Ukraine and yourselves from Russia, and you are similarly our last hope for maintaining any substantive regulation around AI. Godspeed to you. Second part, you're not completely out of the AI game. In generative AI, where US and China have a commanding lead, you probably have little chance to catch up, realistically, but generative AI is just one flawed approach to AI. There are lots of approaches people have thought about, lots of approaches nobody's invented yet. I very much sympathized with the earlier talk from your research lead. While US and China chase the bandwagon, you can do something genuinely innovative and perhaps leapfrog ahead. I loved her message about moving beyond just doing the popular thing and trying to take risks. I have myself long advocated for multinational CERN for AI, going back to AI for Good in Geneva in 2017, and a New York Times op-ed that I published around the same time. I'd still love to see that. I think it has to be focused, though, in a coordinated way on alternative, more reliable approaches to AI. If you do that, you have a chance to do something great. If it's uncoordinated, it just winds up being funding for a bunch of researchers to do individual pet projects. It may have far less impact. So I hope you will do it, and I hope you will think about what I just said. I think, meanwhile, that the US has shot itself in the foot by undermining scientific research, so there is real opportunity for you there. Few questions I've been asked by the organizers. Do you believe current approaches to foundation AI models are likely to be sufficient to achieve trustworthy AI solutions in science, robotics, and public services? In a word, no. Foundation models are inherently untrustworthy because they are opaque black boxes with very little prior knowledge. The best AI for science is not wedded to the chatbot, large language model, general AI doctrine that's so popular. For example, AlphaFold is very different from a standard chatbot. It's a hybrid neurosymbolic model. It has some elements of generative AI and some that are not. It has been thoughtfully and narrowly engineered to a specific problem, 3D protein folding, with a great deal of prior knowledge instead of just learning everything from data. This has been the more productive path. Again, I hope you'll take note of that. Throwing foundation models at everything willy-nilly is likely to yield a lot of what I call 80-20 systems. They get 80% of the problems right, but they make serious errors in some other part of the time. And they get a kind of looks good to me response. So for example, when I asked Grok to give me all the cities west of Denver, most of it looked good. Probably people would think that that report was fine. It's only when you look at the details that you see there are problems. Throwing all the money at foundation models, as the US has done, distracts from has largely done, distracts from broader and more transformative innovation. How is the international AI race going, I was asked. If everything I've argued is wrong, and pure scaling of large language models plus something called inference time compute turns out to be the right answer, nobody will win the AI race because everybody is operating from exactly the same playbook. And so innovations are easily replicated in matters of weeks or months. The notion that the US will win the race and get an insuperable advantage over China is absurd, and vice versa. China might be expecting that. They're not going to get that. However, if GPT-5, which I said is an apparently failed attempt at GPT-5, 4.5 is a failed attempt at 5, is any guide, projects like Stargate may be a massive waste of money. That's a $500 billion investment in large language models. They won't yield AGI if I'm correct. And if LLMs are the way to go, there'll never be any moat because everybody can do the same thing. So there'll be massive price wars, which we're already starting to see, and profits will be relatively meager. So it's going to be a massive waste of money. And note that Microsoft, which can read the writing on the wall, has actually already bailed out on 2 large data center leases. However, if large language models are only part of the answer, which is what I've always argued, then the AGI race may actually be relatively open. That's, again, a chance for Europe possibly to win. What do you think of open source? It's a mixed bag. Open weight models which is most of what we see, are not actually open source. They're not giving you the source code. They're not giving you the data that things are trained on. So calling it open source when it isn't really open source that you can change anything on and look at all of the component parts, it's mostly just marketing right now. However, future models may be genuinely dangerous. They may, for example, give a lot of instructions about how to build nuclear weapons and so forth, and bad actors will try to exploit them for money and power. They're already trying to exploit the limited models that we have now, and they're doing so to some degree successfully. And of course, international collaboration as a whole has taken a hit under Trump and may take further hits. So international governance is likely to be weak, which will blunt responses to errant or abused AI, creating openings for bad actors. Corporate players shouldn't get to decide on their own what is open source. Governments should have some role in that. Other kinds of scientific experts should. Right now, it's basically just up to people like Zuckerberg to do as they please. Then again, certain traditionally good actors also seem to be realigning themselves, which leaves me honestly knowing not what to suggest here. What are your current thoughts on the EU AI Act? Please don't give up. Risks of AI, and this is my last slide, risks of AI still abound, and many misinformation, cybercrime, deepfake porn, reliance on unreliable AI, which is now being used for military purposes, etc., are increasing, and others like bias continue at a steady clip without any sign of abating. So you are, to say something I said before, but to close on it, you are our last best hope. Godspeed to you. Oops.